we are doing sports that are helping us be completely in tune with nature and connect with nature. However, what we're wearing and taking in the ocean just isn't connecting.
So I've been going through my wardrobe and I definitely want to upgrade it a little bit and get a few more items in there, especially as winter in New Zealand is approaching. But I want to know, how do I buy things more sustainably? What company should I approach? What should I look for? What should I avoid? And I just didn't know where to start. So I reached out to my friend Alice at Active Alice Designs. She's absolutely awesome. Alice has been in the industry for years. She has been making activewear for a really long time. She's worked with some really top brands like Adidas. She even worked on the Rio Olympics, but she had a real knock in her health a couple of years back.
And I had no idea how hard it was about to get. Like, that obviously changed everything.
Basically moved her in a completely different direction, and she's working more with small brands and doing a lot of sustainability work. So I thought she'd be a really fantastic person to speak to about this and hopefully give me some tips so I can make some more conscious decisions when it comes to fashion. Can you remind me, when did we meet and what was the industry like during that time?
That was 10 years ago. Ooh. And what was interesting at that time was the ocean attire for women was either a string bikini that was so practical for surfing, or a wetsuit that just looked like it was, well, it had a very similar cut to the men's. My desire was to challenge the status quo, to actually design for the sport that we were doing and to actually empower women at that point, because it was during the kind of early 2000s going into the teens, and sport was very sexualized around women. They were portrayed in the bikini on the beach lying next to the surfboard. Our clothing has propagated so much pollution and so many toxins, and yet we are doing sports that are helping us be completely in tune with nature and connect with nature. However, what we're wearing and taking in the ocean just isn't connecting. I went into it sort of thinking, okay, there's got to be a better way to do things. There's got to be a better way for the environment. There's got to be a better way that we take on social issues. And in a way, I think there is a level to design that can change perception. So I really wanted to go in and change perception, and I wanted to have a much more caring attitude towards the environment.
You also had a really kind of big health thing hit you around the same time as me, I think. Yeah, what happened?
2015, I had been working for global brands like Adidas and H&M. So I'd been working kind of in the global arena with top athletes, top adventurers. I was really fit and healthy at the time. I remember running along the coastline of Port Isaac and thinking, wow, this is absolutely amazing. I'm so lucky to be here running. I feel so good, so lovely to see my family. And then the next day, I couldn't breathe very well around my chest. Throughout the day, I was struggling to put one leg in front of the other. And then within 24 hours, I was completely paralyzed down my left side. Everyone around you is really, really worried. But for me, I was just thinking, wow, this is amazing. What is my body doing? And I had no idea how hard it was about to get. Like, that obviously changed everything. I really started to research everything around my food, what I was wearing, and you start to realize that just within everything, even if you think you're making conscious choices, there were just so many toxins in everything. Even with brands I was working with, where we were working on more sustainable projects and really trying to push that, I really started to see this real reactionary level of, okay, well, everyone else is doing this sustainable collection, so we better do it, and we'll use one type of fabric to be a recycled fabric. Actually, everything else in the system and the humanity that we're destroying in that system has not been thought about.
After the health and everything, how's it changed? What are you working on now?
I started freelancing with more smaller ethical based companies. So I'm working with companies like Finisterre, Fourth Element. But I was really going through a very conflicted time of, do I actually want to be making product? Because I feel like there is so much product in the world. As a designer, I started to reach some pretty existential issues because I just didn't feel comfortable any longer with designing for the sake of designing. I've realized that if you want to change the status quo of things, we have to start by questioning ourselves. That brought me to trying to help people understand the truth of what they're doing. So now I actually do creative movement coaching to help people understand what they're doing, as well as doing sustainability consultancy and design and concept design when I feel it's needed.
In the fashion industry, what do you think are some of the main issues then? I mean, are there still issues?
Okay, so let's dive into it then. First of all, you've got your crude oil. When we talk about this issue of microplastics and microsynthetic fibers in the ocean, they are all coming from any form of clothing that you have that is made from a synthetic. So they can be from the size of a piece of fluff to what we consider a microfiber. So they're invisible to the human eye. When you're wearing the clothing, you're actually breathing in those fibers. In the ocean, now, obviously, they're being swallowed up by fish and mollusks. So when you eat seafood, they're also getting into your system, directly into your digestive system. When we start to think then about non-communicable diseases, you start to think, okay, well, microfibers from synthetic fibers, what are they doing?
What about recycled stuff? Is that, like, have you worked with that?
Even though I have worked for the last 6 or 7 years, I was, at the very beginning working with recycled nylons and polyesters for swimwear, which seemed great at the time. But, actually there's two things. One, I see them being used in quite irresponsible ways for like fleeces in wetsuits, fleeces in swimsuits and undergarments for the ocean. And actually that fleece comes off very, very quickly. You've got elastane, which does not break down very easily at all, which is what makes your clothing stretchy. That usually comes out of somewhere quite quickly, so that's usually one of the problems. And second of all, with that is you've also then got, because you're recycling this petroleum over and over again, the molecules, the structure between the molecules becomes weaker and weaker. Those are some of the issues with recycling. Then you've got all the dyes and finishes. I find it's very difficult when I'm doing a talk and I say to people, 80% of China's waterways are completely polluted.
Yeah, I'm literally in my mind right then. I'm thinking of pictures I've seen of whole towns in China and these rivers.
Yeah. And the thing is, what I've noticed is when I say this to people and talk, they go, oh my God, that's awful. But then you relate it back to their health and you say, well, X amount of those toxins are found in your urine right now. Until people's health is affected, they still don't make that connection. They still don't make that visceral emotional connection properly. And then you've got obviously the transportation of clothing, the fact that we have been manufacturing in more third world countries because it's cheaper. So every time you're making a garment and you're sampling it, stuff's going back and forth to China, back and forth to China, back and forth to China. And then you've got your naturals, things like your cotton. Let's take it, for example, a cotton t-shirt. You get a cotton t-shirt and you think, wow, this is really cheap. It's £10, $10. That t-shirt will have been shipped from somewhere at a very cheap price. So the manufacturing has probably happened in a third world country. We're going to know what the health and safety is for the people working there. There's probably very, very little. There's probably young children working there. It's probably very, very difficult conditions. If that cotton is being dyed with more toxic dyes, they're breathing in. They're getting very, very little wage for that. I mean, watch The True Cost on Netflix.
The disconnect that people have between buying their clothes and wearing them and where they're actually from it's crazy. Like, we just don't think about it, do we?
It's crazy, isn't it? But then you take it back even further, back to the source, and you go, okay, well, where's the fiber being made? Well, okay, by that point, the people who are manufacturing the fiber getting paid very, very, very little. And then you take it back even further to the source of where that cotton is being grown, because they are so desperate that by that point, because they're getting so little money for their cotton, that they're going to extremes in trying to grow it, and they are spraying it with pesticides that are infiltrating the water systems. They're affecting that whole community. The level of cancers, tumors, neurological problems is absolutely rife. And added to that is the water consumption.
Yeah, I was thinking that's something I had
there's quite a lot of problems, and it's a really, really big complicated system. In our culture, what has been added to it is the fashion industry has really played on people's insecurities. And you think about Instagram and marketing and what people should look like, to the point that they feel, if I don't buy this, I'm not worth anything, and having to buy the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then you've got social media propagating that and making people feel completely insecure if they don't have that next thing.
How do we look for things that are better made, or like that are more expensive versus cheaper things that tend to break?
Because my opinion is we should go back to the way that we used to go back to, which was we used to save up for clothing. It would be really, really good quality clothing. It would fit really well. There wasn't these massive different patterns. It would have such longevity. You know, people turn around to me and say, well, to do that, it costs a lot of money. Instead of buying 20 t-shirts from Primark and buy one. It's only society's perception that we should have new things.
Is there any change actually going on? Are people starting to, like, are companies changing their mindsets? Are consumers changing their mindsets around these issues?
Now, this is interesting because for a while I was getting incredibly frustrated, and I was like, oh, this is just not fair on the consumer, and it's not fair as a designer because I just don't believe in what's happening here. This shouldn't be just a good marketing story. This should be legitimate. We should be designing from the end use of the garment. We can't do that when greenwashing is happening because it doesn't bring any legitimacy or authenticity to what we're doing.
This is where I thought it was, like, worse in the way that, like, companies know that we want to buy nice things, and then they're exploiting that and greenwashing their products to get more sales out of us.
The danger is that it becomes another trend, and we don't want another trend. We want legitimacy. However, I feel like two things have happened. One, I feel like we're experiencing this global shift whereby consumers are becoming a lot more savvy and they're going to be demanding a lot more. And two, we cannot, like, it's insulting to the consumer to try and greenwash them. What we're going to be demanding is complete transparency. We've got organizations like Fashion Revolution who do the Instagram of who made my clothes, and you can send it to a company and be like, who made my clothes? I want complete transparency. I just think, especially with this whole pandemic now, the whole thing that's going to come out of it is trust. If a consumer does not trust a brand, they're not going to keep buying it anymore. And I think in order to cultivate trust, you have to be honest.
Okay, so right now there's not much transparency in most companies. What do you look for if you're going to go and buy something? What would you look for on the labels? What materials?
First of all, I would start thinking about this. Another thing that this pandemic's really highlighted is community and buying locally. If I was making a purchase now, I actually would look to these smaller localized designers and makers that are making, very ethical and very considered, slower ways of making and designing. I actually be buying from them. So if you start buying more locally and you demand, better fabrics, better conditions, better transparency, better sustainable practices, better humanitarian practices, then these companies have no choice but to actually then follow the status quo. Question why you're buying. The psychological perception that you're not good enough if you don't have this is materialism, and it's not good for us, and it doesn't make us happy. And I think that the thing I really start with clients is I'm like, well, what makes you happy? So I think, actually the fundamental psychology as to why you're trying to fill that void is what needs to be questioned first of all.
I love that we've come basically like full circle from like looking outside and what we should buy to then bringing it back and reflecting it upon ourselves, and like, why do we even feel the need to buy these things in the first place? Thank you, Alice. Thank you so much. I feel like I've learnt a bunch. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Take care, lovely. Bye.